Today, I've got a review of a Splatter Western genre mashup, and I start a new project. Welcome to the depths. Hello, welcome to Reading from the Depths. My name is Lecton. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, I have a review of the book Here Comes the Sun by Justin M. Woodward, which is a splatter western, and I read this as part of my reading for June on the Range, which is a reading event that was started by Michael K. Vaughan and is dedicated to reading westerns throughout the month of June. I tend to stay on the periphery of a lot of reading events. I don't have time to dedicate myself to them fully, but I usually pick up a book here or there if there's an event that's interesting to me. And usually June on the Range isn't super exciting to me because westerns are not my favorite genre. I read a few classical westerns in my youth, and my experience of them is that they kind of have this level of toxic masculinity and racist settler colonialism that just isn't fun for me. And now I know not all classic westerns are like that, and I know that at that time and place, the people were racist and misogynist, and I'm fine with that. I'm happy for characters to be all sorts of complicated, but when I have the experience or the feeling that the author shares those sentiments, then it's not so fun. And that was my experience with westerns in the past, both classical western novels as well as films. So I don't go out of my way to seek out westerns, though I have read some contemporary westerns that don't have that kind of feeling, and I enjoy them when I do. They're just not on the top of my list. So I really didn't have any plans to be part of June on the Range. But then I came across this Splatter Western series, and it sunk its hooks deep in me, and here we are. So what is the Splatter Western series? I want to start with that because that's my new project. I want to read all of them. So let me tell you about them. And let me tell you how I found them, because I found them by accident. The way I found them was I had just finished reading Chandler Morrison's Dead Inside, which I'm sure a lot of you have read. It is a extremely graphic horror novel about a necrophiliac who has a relationship with a cannibal, so as you do. And I'd finished that, and I wanted to see what other books he'd written, and I know he just released a new novel called American Narcissus, so I was planning on maybe reading that one soon and doing a review of those two together. But so I was looking at what other novels he had written, and I came across one called Human-Shaped Fiends, and the cover of the novel, or of the book, was really arresting. It really grabs you. And then it said Splatter Western on the bottom. So I thought that was interesting, but I just kind of filed it in the back of my mind. Then I had finished an anthology where there was some short stories by Haley Piper, who is a queer horror author who I've read a number of books from, including No Gods for Drowning, which is kind of like a dark fantasy detective mystery that also has some cosmic horror mixed in. It's really great. And she has a trilogy called The Worm and His Kings trilogy, which I haven't read yet, but I wanted to see if she had any other standalone books to read, because I'd read a lot of her short stories. As I was looking through the books she had written, I found one called Cruel Angels Past Sundown, also a splatter western with the same really graphic art style on the cover. So then I became intrigued, and I started researching, what is this splatter western series? And I have to tell you, it's hard to find them all. The publishers do not make it easy. So the splatter westerns are all published by Death Head Press, it seems, and that's an imprint of Dead Sky Publishing. But if you go to the Death Head Press website, they're not listed there at all. And if you go to the Dead Sky Publishing website, they're there, but it doesn't seem like all of them are there, and they're not in like a convenient or easy list to find. So I sleuthed around on Amazon and Goodreads and other places, and there was someone had made a list on Goodreads, but it wasn't complete, and it was a couple of years old. So I managed to find what I think are all the ones they've published so far, as well as the ones that they are publishing this year. There are 20 that are already published, and then there are 3 more publishing this year in August, September, and December. And then there are 4 one-shot comic books that were published starting in October, November, December of 2023, and then in January. So 23 books, 4 comics, and they're all either novellas or novels. They go back and forth, and they're all by different authors, and they all are this combination of splatterpunk and horror and westerns. But other than that, there's no through line. So some of them seem to have vampires, some have zombies, some look like they have the old gods or other kind of cosmic horror weirdness happening. At least it what it looks like from the cover. Some are just more classic westerns, but they lean to the splatterpunk level of gore and grime. So they are all over the place. Generally, I'm not interested in collecting things. I read most of my books digitally, and I don't have any interest in like getting more possessions than I need. And the only books that I intentionally seek out hard copies of are ones that I want to share with other people, whether it be my family or my friends and so forth. But these covers are so beautiful, and I don't think they're all done by the same artist, but they're all in the same style. And so I decided I really want to buy all of these. So I'm slowly collecting them all. I only have a few of them so far. Looking at this list of stories that hits right in my genre that I was so excited by, I decided I'd jump into the June on the Range reading event, and I was planning on reading Haley Piper's story first because I thought reading a queer horror western would be a great way for Pride Month, you know? However, before I bought that book or any of the others, I wanted to see if I can get them from my library. And I have two different libraries that I have digital library passes from, and none of them are available from my library. However, my library is connected to Hoopla, and quite a number of the books are available on Hoopla. So if you're interested, before you go and purchase any of them, if you at least are in the US, I don't know where else Hoopla has licenses, you can go and you have a library card or another subscription to the Hoopla service, you can check out a number of them there. Not all of them, I don't think, but quite a few of them. And so the newest one that they published is this one called Here Comes the Sun by Justin Woodward. And that was the first one that came up when I searched in Hoopla. So I decided to read that one first. It's a novella. It's only about 150 pages or so. And so that's what we're going to do a review of today. But right before that review, this plan for my project is I want to read all of the Splatter Westerns. I don't have a timeline. I'm planning on reading, I've already read 4 of them and the comic books. I would like to read at least 1 a month, maybe 2, depending on if it's a novella or a novel. There's no stress. We'll see how it goes, but that's the plan. So if you would like to join me in that project, you know, I welcome it. I'm having a lot of fun so far. I've read 4 of them, like I said, and I've loved each one that I read. So let me know down in the comments if you're interested in being part of this as well. And if you've read any of these, which ones you've read. But right now, let's talk about Here Comes the Sun by Justin M. Woodward. So I'm going to read you the blurb on the back. There had been talk of monsters around the small, quiet town of Fort Whipple for some time before the evening of the brutal massacre. First, it was the livestock. Dead, shriveled bodies lined the fields, drained of their blood. But when human bodies begin falling from the sky, a dark protector of sorts is dispatched to minimize the casualties. So it's kind of exactly what it sounds like, which is it's set in a very typical Old West town, small town, and all these mysterious deaths start happening. And if you can't guess from the blurb, it's a vampire. So you have this vampire mashup with the Western genre. And it's really exciting. The action is great. Every chapter, it kind of has a little setup, then like a punch, and then a cliffhanger, and you just want to keep going to the next chapter. And you know, it's only around 150 pages. You can read it really quickly. I think I read it in one day in just 2 sittings. We follow 2 main characters. We follow the sheriff, who is investigating what's going on, and we follow the Dark Protector, who you find out is another vampire, who's a senior vampire who's been around for hundreds of years. It is his job to stop this youngin from killing all these innocent people. And his goal isn't to kill him. His goal is just to stop him, because he said he has what's called blood frenzy. When you're a new vampire, you're overwhelmed and you go into a killing spree. So it's his job to kind of stop him. Yet this vampire is a black man, or a black vampire, I guess you'd say, and he knows that he isn't really welcome in America. You know, he came over here maybe 100 years ago or something, after he'd already been turned into a vampire, and he knows that it's difficult for him in America, so he can't just go into town and announce himself. He has to do everything from the shadows, never mind the fact that he's a vampire. And so his story is exciting, and we go back and forth between him and the sheriff, and the sheriff is a very stereotypical kind of character. He has a good heart. He wants to do what's best. He wants to make sure he takes care of everyone in the town, and he wants to make sure he always does what's right, even when it's the hard thing to do. So on the surface, it's a very archetypal character, but it still has a lot of gravitas, and I think part of it is because he has a really great relationship with his son. So he has a son who's maybe 10 years old or so who idolizes him, and his son just wants to be like his dad. But the sheriff's goal is to keep the son and his wife out of danger, as well as protect the town. And you have this really interesting dynamic between father and son, and that relationship is actually really important in this kind of gory splatterfest of a story. It has this real heart between the relationship between father and son. And what it asks us is, what is our responsibility to our kin? Not just to protect them, but how do we teach them to be good people? How do we serve as good role models? And how do we lead them on a path where they can be good people, and how they can be a benefit in the world, and how they don't go down the path of vice or sin or any of these things, you know? And that relationship between the father and son is mirrored to some extent in the relationship between the senior vampire and the young vampire, because his goal, again, isn't to kill the young vampire, but it's to stop him and protect him and to, show him why it's better for them if they don't kill humans. And so you have this interesting dynamic that among these 150 kind of gore splashed pages, you have this really touching story of a father and son. And, I think it's great. I think that there's also instances where they talk about the racism, what it's like to be a black man in the Old West. You follow some of the female characters once in a while, and you see their position on things and how they interpret what's going on and how they understand their role in society, which is also very interesting. And I think what's great is the story starts. So in the prologue, in a horror book, most prologues, is going to be your first victim. That's kind of what a prologue is for. And in this story, the prologue opens with an old widow being woken up in the middle of the night. And so you have this very stereotypical victim, right? This old defenseless widow who wakes up in the middle of the night. But what does she do? She grabs a shotgun because she says, no one's going to take advantage of me because I'm a widow. And instead of hiding, she takes her shotgun and goes to investigate. And it's a horror book, so you kind of know things don't really end well for her. But I love that spirit, And that spirit goes throughout the whole novella. If you can't tell, I really, really enjoyed it. It has interesting vampire lore. Not everything is traditional with vampire lore. It takes a little bit of this, a little bit of that, especially since, as I said, there's this order of vampires and this cabal of vampire seniors who dispatch our protagonist vampire to go stop the young one. And so there's a lot more story there that we didn't really build up in this novella. And if anything, that is the one fault that I'll give to the story, is that it's a little too fast. And I loved it because it was fast. It was very easy to read. It was very readable. But if maybe 50 pages more, you could have learned a little more of the lore between, there could be a little more world building between just how vampires have existed in this world and what it means to be a vampire. And there's also a little deeper you could have gone into some of the relationships between the townsfolk. You have a chapter or two with the Reverend, which is interesting. Would have been interesting to have a little more time with him. There are a few characters that I would have liked to spend more time with and just learn a little more about in this small town. So it could have been a little longer, and I wouldn't have minded. However, as it was nice, short, punchy. Like I said, very gory, but it doesn't feel gratuitous. It was a lot of fun. I had a great time, and I highly recommend it. So again, that's called Here Comes the Sun by Justin M. Woodward, and it's part of the Splatter Western series. So that's all I have for you today. Has anyone else read this? Let me know what you think. Have you read any of the other books in the Splatter Western series? Let me know down in the comments if you have, what you think of them. I'm excited to read them. I'm sure when you have a couple dozen different books from different authors that they're not all going to be the same quality, but all the ones I've read so far have been exciting. So I'm looking forward to it. And with that, I'll say thank you so much for coming. Be kind to yourselves, take care of each other, and go slowly.